I'm Bree Luck, and you are listening to the Pause to Go podcast, where we explore the process of turning life's transitions into stellar transformations. You can expect interviews with experts, straight talk with remarkable humans, and conversations about making the most of every phase of life. Because when we approach life's stickiest spots with curiosity, support, and a little bit of inspiration, anything is possible. So whether you're on your way to work or settling in with your favorite beverage, together we can pause to go. As a solopreneur, I really like the flexibility to work from pretty much anywhere, so I'm happy to head down to Code-Based Co-working, where I can enjoy the company of others while I tackle my to-do list. Also, they have a state-of-the-art, consumer-friendly podcasting studio that is, frankly, my home away from home. So head over to Code-Based Co-working, check it out, and when you do, tell them that Bree sent you. I want to let you know that I want to help you become a creative changemaker. If you are interested in taking on your own change-making project, from writing a screenplay to starting your own podcast or launching a new business or nonprofit organization, I'd love to talk to you about what you're dreaming up and how I can support you as you bring it to fruition. The application is found on my website at thelovelyunbecoming.com, and I'm only accepting 4 clients. So if you're interested, fill out the application. Let's chat. In today's episode, I talk with Jaclyn Michelle about a mystical tool that I've really enjoyed exploring over the last couple of years. It's called Human Design. I love Jaclyn's approach to exploring, explaining, and sharing human design because she finds a balance that feels very manageable for a curious skeptic like me. Jaclyn is a Human Design Chart Alchemist and writer who believes that it is vital that all humans have the resources, time, and energy to hold space in our lives for emotional and spiritual expansion, exploration, and soul care. She has made it her mission to make tools like Human Design that can be pretty complex, practical, actionable, and accessible for everyone. I wanted her to come on the podcast because she is a great example of someone who has made an enormous life transformation that was passion-centered, creative, and really service-oriented. Jaclyn is a recovering workaholic who left corporate America to launch InteriorCreature.com with the hope of holding the space required for those who are hungry to reconnect with their higher selves and their own interior creature. Since she opened her virtual doors in 2018, she has worked one-to-one with over 1,000 clients, walking them through their unique human design. And her blog posts help an average of 20 to 30,000 folks a month start the process of understanding their chart. She does really great work, and she also offers a discount to Pause to Go listeners. So be sure to listen to the end for the discount code. And now, enjoy this conversation with Jaclyn Michelle. Thank you for peopling with me today.
I'm excited to people with you today. This will be good.
So I first came across your website, which is just fabulous, by the way, InteriorCreature.com. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that happened. I was going through a pretty big life change. I was going through a career change, and I had started doing this neural reprogramming work. And while I was doing that, I came across this thing called Human Design, which I had never heard of before. And I was really curious about it. I did my chart. I found it really interesting as a tool, right? Mm-hmm. I am curious enough that I decided there are so many tools to sort of look at life and personality and changes and relationships that I wanted to find a way to combine them all. So I made a book for myself that was the Book of Woo. And it had astrology. It also had Enneagram information. It had Myers-Briggs. It had Sparketype. I don't know if you know that. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then I added human design in there too. And then I made them for my children and I made them for a few friends. And I'm not an expert in any of these tools. So I was looking for resources that I could call on that felt right, that felt accessible, that were well written. And your explanations of human design so resonated with me. You're such a beautiful writer.
Oh, thank you.
And also your use of art in your website is just beautiful. And so I want to thank you for making this tool truly accessible for me and for becoming part of this whole landscape of exploring personality.
Oh, well, thank you. When I first came to human design myself, there weren't a lot of accessible resources. Everything felt very like deep woo, like very esoteric, very kind of, jargony. And that drove me a little crazy because I'm like, this is such a powerful tool for people to kind of explore who they are, do deep shadow work. We should talk about it in a way that's more practical, actionable, accessible. So I tried to build the thing that didn't exist when I was first coming to the system. And now there's so many people talking about it. So it's kind of exploded, but I really appreciate your words. Like that makes me happy. That's why I built it. So yay.
So I imagine that a number of listeners probably don't know what human design is.
That's pretty new. I totally understand.
Can you explain it?
So human design, it's considered a channeled system, but you don't have to believe in channeling or any of that stuff for it to be kind of helpful for you. It combines 4 kind of ancient wisdom teachings that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the guy that quote unquote channeled it basically had been studying all 4 of these systems and then just had this kind of epiphany, this download, if you will, where he realized how they could all work in tandem with each other. So it pulls from the Hindu Brahmin chakra tradition, pulls from Kabbalah's tree of life from Jewish mysticism, pulls from the I Ching, which is an important text in like Chinese Buddhist and Confucian and Taoist practices, among many others. And it also pulls from Western astrology. It's almost like it's combining together to make this map of how your energy works as you move through the world. So it lets you know kind of what gifts you've been given, what lessons you're here to learn karmically, and how your energy kind of flows, like how your specific intuition talks to you. And then from there, it gives you like a strategy for decision making. It lets you know where you're really empathic, where you're really like intuitive. So it's just, it's just a tool to use to kind of do that deep self-reflective work and stop for a moment. Am I walking through the world in a way that feels really authentic, or have I taken on a lot of conditioned behaviors, ideas about myself? Yeah. And it gives you the agency to kind of like interrupt some of those patterns.
I love that conditioning is really at the core of working with human design, recognizing how social conditioning impacts us specifically according to our human design types. Can you give us a little example of what the different types are?
Absolutely. It's funny, actually, my background before I came to human design was actually child development. I worked as a teacher. And I think when we're kids, we don't realize that as we're little sponges, we're absorbing so much information about our identity, who we are, so much that we're co-authoring with other people. And I think again, human design shows us very clearly where that is. So in our charts, in our human design charts, we have these things called centers. They're based loosely on the chakras. And it's basically kind of how our different aspects of our energy works, whether we're really kind of getting messages from within ourselves or whether we're taking in messages from other people. And through that kind of patterning, I guess, of those different centers, which ones present as, they say, open or which ones present as closed, we're given something called a type. And our type, basically, it's like a series of traits that we all kind of share in common. There are generators and manifesting generators. There are people who are builders and doers and accomplishers and creators. There are projectors who are here to guide. There are manifestors who are like big idea people who kind of run toward things and figure it out as they go. And then there are reflectors whose charts are completely open. They have all of their centers open. They're basically walking empaths, walking mirrors for society. So the way those centers we have are organized dictates which one of these five or four types we are. And then from there, we're given like a strategy for decision making to kind of, learn to discern what's mine versus what's coming in from outside.
And what is the most common type?
Generators and manifesting generators. You and I are both generators. We are about 80% of the world's population. And the other 20% is comprised mostly of projectors and then manifestors and reflectors. Reflectors are less than it depends on whose statistics you're looking at. Less than 1% of the world's population. They're a very rare type of individual. But most folks are either a generator or a manifesting generator.
So interesting. Another thing that has come up on my radar that seems very closely related to human design, and I noticed that you also include it in some of your materials, is the gene key.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So we had the gentleman that named Robert Allen Krakauer. He's the gentleman that quote unquote channeled human design. At some point in his career, sharing this system with people, he had a lot of people who studied under him to learn human design and then in turn share it with other people. One of his students was a guy named Richard Rudd. And Richard basically saw the way the I Ching kind of loops into human design. We have these numbers. If you've ever looked at a human design chart, you know it's comprised of shapes that are different colors with some lines connecting things, and there's numbers all over it. The numbers correlate to the hexagrams from the I Ching. And Richard basically was like, this is the ultimate personal reflection tool. If we can look at the gates that we have activated, he calls them gene keys. So basically, it's like we're using three names for the same thing. They're the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. We call them gates in human design. Richard calls them gene keys. But he basically gives you a way of looking at that energy. And he thinks of them as kind of the same way that I kind of intuitively came to, that they're all either gifts we've been given or lessons we're here to learn. And it's the way our conditioning kind of, collides with our energy that determines, is it a gift for us or is it a lesson? So in his book, The Gene Keys, he lays out, when you're in the shadow of whatever that gift is or that lesson is, here's what it feels like. And he talks about kind of, and I know you talk a lot about shifting to a new paradigm in your podcast. He's kind of trying to get us ready for that shift that human design talks about. And he's like, if you're in a space where you are taking actions where it's other people to the detriment of yourself, you're in something we call the repressive. Or if you're taking actions that are like glorifying yourself to the detriment of others, you're in the reactive. And so if it's others over self or self over others, like that's also the shadow side of the energy. And then he tells you what the gift feels like, rather, when you kind of are able to alchemize all of that stuff, shed some conditioning, really start walking toward love. Here's what it feels like. And then he even gives the city, which is like the enlightened version of it. So it's almost like, I always joke that, we're told there's not an instruction manual to being a human being. Yes, there is. We look at our human design chart, we can look at our gene keys, like there it is right there. Those are the big core spiritual kind of, lessons to walk with. And so it's such a powerful tool to kind of really sit with yourself and go, well, what is my relationship to, say, control or self-love or, purpose and meaning, like, and acts of service? Like that's all wired into our chart.
My not self, I guess, is what it's called, is frustration. Is that right? That's as a generator. Is it just sacral generators? Is it all generators? What is it?
All generators have the same not self theme. Our body uses frustration. I always liken it to like lane assist in a new car. My car is old. I don't have that, but I understand the fancy new ones. Where when you drift out of your lane, like, or maybe you're in a construction zone and you have to kind of change lanes. If you don't put your turn signal on, it beeps at you, vibrates at you, lights flash, depending on what kind of car you have. That's what frustration does for us as generators. Every type has something called a not self theme, and it's your body's way of letting you know, ooh, you're trying to give your energy to something that actually isn't for you. And so I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I'm going to kind of shake things up, make you a little uncomfortable. Hopefully you'll listen to your body and make a different choice. But if you continue down that path, it'll continue to get increasingly, louder and more uncomfortable.
It was so interesting because I think that I kept feeling like I was on the right path in my life because I wasn't sad. Right? I wasn't sad. I was a pretty happy person, but I was frustrated all the time. I got so easily frustrated. And once I made that realization, it was huge to then recognize, oh, here's where frustration is coming up in my life. And that was such an opportunity to reevaluate and to look at it from an alignment perspective. What are some of the other not self states?
Yeah. Projectors have one that's, I think, like, it can feel so isolating. So projectors, they're here to guide people. That's kind of their role as they walk through the world. They can either see like a process better than other people can see it, or they can see people better than they can see themselves. But since they're the guides, like if you've ever tried to give someone completely unsolicited advice, like, or if you've been on the receiving end of it, how does that feel? Like, it's like, ooh, prickly, right? Like we don't want someone coming up to us and guiding us without our consent. And so projectors a lot of times have to learn where their involvement is sought, where they're recognized, et cetera. That's actually part of their strategy as they walk through the world. They're here to wait for recognition and then an invitation, so their involvement to be sought. So when they start trying to guide, where their guidance maybe isn't needed, isn't recognized, they feel bitter. Bitterness is their not self. And I'm the daughter of a projector. And I think through my dad's kind of experiences and like early in his career where he wasn't quite in the right fit and how he would come home every night so bitter, but he wasn't bitter at the students he was trying to teach. He was bitter at himself. He was like, did I pick the wrong field? What's going on? And so that bitterness is really common for projectors. Manifestors' not self theme is anger because it's so funny. They don't have a sacral that's closed. So the thing that you and I share as generators, and we share with all manifesting generators, is we have this one center called our sacral, and it's defined, it's closed. So we are basically stewards of our physical energy. Projectors have it open. Manifestors also have it open, but they're a little bit more spontaneous, a little bit more impulsive. They get an idea, an inkling, they just kind of run out the door toward it. Anger is the thing that lets them know, ooh, I ran toward the wrong thing. Like it just will stop working. And it's like turning up the volume on our frustration. It's like lane assist, but all of the different things going off at once. So it's the thing that lets them know you ran toward the wrong thing or you didn't inform the right people, because their strategy is to kind of give people a heads up about what they're doing and when they're doing it so they can kind of clear obstacles or, co-create with them. And reflectors just get disappointed. I think they're so open. And I've met reflectors that are really healthy in terms of understanding what's theirs, what someone else's. But a lot of reflectors kind of span toward either being so sensitive and not having the tools to figure out, what's mine, what's someone else's, or they've become Teflon. They've like shut down. So if they're making decisions where they're actually following and mirroring other people's stuff, it's disappointing because they think in the moment it's going to feel good. And then they commit to it and start following through and they realize, oh, no, wait, that was what somebody else wanted. That was what somebody else desired of me or for me. And I mirrored back and it just feels deeply disappointing. So yeah, that's why they have the longest strategy in human design. They have to wait a whole 28 days before they make a massive decision because their body needs time to like feel into every nook and cranny of it and figure out what's consistently like feels good for them.
Can you go through the other strategies for the different types?
Oh, yeah. So generators, we have one that's the easiest and the hardest at the same time. Our strategy for decision making is we're supposed to wait to respond. Say somebody asks you to go get coffee with them. Instead of just mirroring back their desire to get coffee, you and I are supposed to just pause for a second and check in with our body. You and I have the same actually body level centers defined. We both have spleen sacral, which is really interesting. So I thought that was so cool when I looked and like, oh, we have a
We're basically the same person.
So you have your head, mind, and throat defined too, which is I'm completely open other than that. So, you at least have this like consistent sense of what you're inspired by or, what your ideas are. You're a bit more consistent in your vocal patterns. I'm not. But anyway, when we go to make decisions, so say it's like, do we go have coffee with this person? We have to kind of check it through the three centers that we have closed. Does it feel safe? Our spleen's kind of trying to figure that out. Is it something we get to do or have to do based on our sacral? And the root's kind of going, is it the right time to go get coffee with this person? So we just want to pause, check in with ourselves. And once our body gives us the green light, then we can go ahead and take action and say yes or no. But I think a lot of generators, because we're wired to be doers, we just do. We say, okay. And then we're midway through coffee going, why did I say yes to this? I don't really want to be here or whatever it is. So our strategy is to wait for our body to talk to us and then respond. Projectors have that wait for recognition and an invitation. They're checking in with their body as they're like, say they're interviewing for a job. As they're applying, they have to recognize themselves in that job, posting like, ooh, am I the type of person they're looking for? When they're interviewing, they have to say, do I feel seen, heard, valued, included? Is my involvement sought, or are like people trying to pass off my ideas as their own, or people talking over me? Do I feel like I'm really present in this room, etc.? Like, so they're waiting for that deep recognition, and it has to feel good in their body as well. So they might have their spleen defined or their solar plexus. The solar plexus might go, do I care enough about these people, this opportunity? Like, does it feel emotionally resonant? So they're waiting for that yes from their body and the situation externally to correct. So it's kind of a little bit more, it can take a little longer. Reflectors have to wait that full 28 days. That's their strategy. And it's only for big decisions, not for like, do I buy this blouse? Do I have coffee with this person? Cause like, we don't have time for that. Like, they can just kind of be surprised pleasantly by what feels good in the moment. But when it comes to a massive decision, they do have to kind of wait for basically, and to bring in astrology, the moon will transit every single one of their gates over the course of the 28-day period. They're feeling into all of their different gifts and traits and habits and challenges, and they'll figure out what's consistent over the course of them. Manifestors are the only ones who don't have that word wait in their strategy. Their strategy as they're making decisions is they just go toward the thing that feels good. And then they're double checking with what they've got closed in their body, their authority, as they're doing it, and telling people what they're going to do before they do it. And it's very strategic. So it's like if you were going to buy a house, for example, like you might want to tell your partner that's something that you want to do, and hopefully they're on board with you, or, tell your real estate agent, maybe tell a financial advisor, but you might have a neighbor that you don't want to tell until like you actually are nailing the sign in front of your lawn or whatever. Like, so it's about being strategic about who you tell, what you tell them, and when, so they can either co-create with you or help move obstacles out of the way. If someone's going to become an obstacle, if you tell them, then you have to be strategic about like how much you let them know and when, because manifestors really just want to be able to walk through the world unimpeded, because it's just kind of like their body knows and they just go.
Yeah. One of my daughters is a manifestor. I have one daughter who is a manifesting generator and then another who is a manifestor. And my manifestor daughter is just go, 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 go. And I have to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, don't forget to clue us in from time to time on what's happening.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's something kids learn. I think when they're little, especially manifestor children, they start realizing that they have to give people the heads up, because if they don't, either we get worried about them or, and they start realizing too, like they have to be really strategic about it. Like, so it's always interesting to watch them kind of navigate that.
It's been really fun to talk about our different types as a family. And for me to just have some more tools as a parent to be a little more sensitive to where they're coming from. And so that's really cool. Tell us about your path to becoming a human design expert. How did this happen for you?
Well, in true 1-3 fashion, like we have something called a profile in human design. And part of my way I walk through the world is by bumping into things. Totally bumped into this. So when I left college, even back further, I thought I wanted to be an actress for like the majority of my childhood. You would ask me at 16 what I'd be doing. I would have been convinced I'd be on Broadway right now. No, I got to college for theater, realized this is not what I want to be doing. This doesn't feel good anymore. And so I joined a nonprofit after college and went into the classroom, and I taught in a low-income area in New York City for a few years. And so I started in education. And then from there, I found that I was adept at teaching kids how to read. Like that just came very naturally to me. And I love children. I think they're fantastic. I had first and second graders. And so I did that for a while. And then New York City has such a diverse, massive school system that when they find someone who's good at something, they quickly promote them. And so it became very quickly in my career, people were like, you're very good at this. We want you to do this next. And they kept, I started working for the nonprofit. Then I got headhunted to work for a charter school. And so I spent about 15 years working in education, either teaching kids how to read or then finally teaching teachers how to teach kids how to read. And I ended up with one of the top 3 educational companies in the country. And from there, I quickly, again, kept getting promoted, and I was doing all the things that theoretically should have made me feel successful, but I was working 80 hours a week. The nature of the job kept changing. The responsibilities kept changing, and I got really burnt out. My schedule was incredibly travel heavy. I was leaving on a Sunday, getting home on Friday at midnight, having been in 5 states over the course of that week. And I looked at my calendar from that time. If I wasn't traveling, I was in front of teachers. And if I wasn't in front of teachers, I was on a plane, or I was barely sleeping. Anyway, my body started to kind of shut down, and I ended up with a ton of autoimmune issues. And I also was drinking quite a bit at the time, which was not healthy and not a good coping mechanism. And so finally my body just said it was done. I happen to be at the time, I'm a Pisces. I'm a Pisces sun and moon. I have a Pisces Mercury. I've always been very spiritually, emotionally, curious. So during the time I was doing all that traveling, I had downloaded a lot of podcasts that were, spiritual or astrology based, etc. And I was in a Facebook group for one of those podcasts, and someone posted this question, and she's like, I feel like my job has eaten my life. I need a tool to kind of help me find myself again. Does anyone have any suggestions? And I remember I was about halfway into a bottle of wine at that time. And I remember going, did I write that? Hold on a second. Did I post in this Facebook group and not remember it? Because it literally felt like she was describing me at the time. Because I definitely had lost the thread of who I was. I was so on that hamster wheel, just doing, that I was like, something needs to give. I read the rest of the thread and I was reading people's comments, and someone said, Human Design changed my life. I got a reading. It gave me all these tools. It gave me all these things to reflect on. That is what you should do. And I remember going, human what? Like, I had never heard of it at the time. And in my, 2/3 of a bottle of wine at this point, I went on to Amazon, ordered every book that they had on human design. It was the best drunk decision I think I've ever made in my life. By the time all the books arrived, I had quit my job and I basically was bedridden. I was so like, my body was in such a state of like adrenal fatigue and all that. It had shut down. And so for about 6 months, I slept. I read about human design. I slept some more. I read about human design. And my whole goal at first was I want to understand my chart because I do not remember who I was before this job. And I feel like I have outsourced all of my major decisions to other people since I left college. And like, I need to figure out what I want. And through discovering this tool and discovering all these really powerful things about myself, it felt like looking in a mirror that was compassionate but critical at the same time. Like it was an accurate mirror that was like, these are the things you're wired for. These are the things you're not. And here's where you might walk into some trouble. And it just felt so supportive. And I felt so seen and deeply understood, which was creepy because it's computer software. Like you put in your birth date, place, and time, and it gives you this chart that looks wacky. And then I was like, how does this thing know? But once I figured it out for myself, I started doing what I think a lot of people do. I started pulling for friends, for family members, and looking at their charts was also really healing to understand, this is why my brother and I butt heads, or this is why my mom and I struggled with this thing. At that point in time, as we were sharing at kind of the top of the conversation, there weren't a lot of resources out there that felt very accessible, practical, actionable. And from my background teaching kids how to read, I got really good at making very complex things very simple. So I've always been a writer. I decided to start writing about it. And, from there kind of got pushed out of the nest to start giving readings. And now it was kind of accidentally became my next career. While I was using it to try to figure out what my next career would be, it kind of became my next career.
Because I stumbled upon your site and I loved it so much. I truly thought that I was like, I have found this person. I'm the only person who has found this person. But you actually help like upwards of 20,000 people a month are using your website.
It's nuts. It's funny because I don't have a marketing background. I did work in sales for a while, but it was because like the program I was working with was really good. Like I don't have that as my my formal education. I don't know if it's my website's good at SEO. I don't know, but I found that like my metrics they surprise me every month when I see the number of like unique people that come to my site and leave me comments. And I can't tell you how much it means to me. The comments I get are like, this is the first time I've understood that concept. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Like that's what makes me feel, that's what gets me up every day. It's my sacral yes to help people make meaning of this tool that can be so powerful.
I know that we'll talk about how to get in touch with you, how to access all that you have to offer in a little bit. I'd love to flip and talk about, because you have made such a huge change in your life, you're a great example. This whole season of Pause to Go is about creative change makers, and you have done this. You have completely changed your life.
Oh, 100%.
And it is such a creative way to do it. Your writing is just gorgeous. And I would love to go through, I have 7 ways to really manifest change. Manifest is for SEO purposes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, SEO that we've referred to now a couple of times is search engine optimization. And it's why you see anything that you see on the internet. So just letting you know that. I would love to go through the 7 and just have you do a rapid fire response to how each way has been important in your life. So the first one is emotional. What has your emotional path been? Or has it been important?
Oh, 100%. When I was in that space of just working 80 hours a week, and I wish I was being hyperbolic, it wasn't. I wasn't in touch with my emotions at all. I was really in a state of fight or flight and just kind of like walk through the world. And I was using alcohol as a numbing tool. When I wasn't working, I was drinking, and I was drinking way more than I should. I wasn't an alcoholic. I feel like it's almost disrespectful to alcoholics to call myself that, but I definitely was abusive. I was in that very gray area of abusive drinking. And I realized that I actually needed to start feeling my feelings. That was actually a big part of what allowed me to kind of go through this change, was I had to stop hiding from them and allow myself to really sit with them. And to do that, I had to get sober. And so that was a big part of, I think, for myself, like I am a completely different human than I was at that point in time, because I actually allow myself to feel things now. Actually allowing ourselves to have feelings is kind of important. And, all those tools that we use to numb it, that was a big thing that was holding me back from making deeper connections with friends, with loved ones, etc. And I'm so much more present. And human design also helped me with understanding my emotions. You and I both have an open emotional solar plexus, which means we sponge, mirror, magnify other people's feelings as well as feeling our own. So even knowing that and kind of working with that openness has been really helpful.
What I really appreciate is the celebration of feeling all of the emotions, the full spectrum of emotions.
Someone posted this fantastic wheel the other day on Instagram, and it was color coded, and it was all these different shades of disappointed, a little bit, a little despondent, nostalgic. And it was all these feelings. And we used to actually have a graphic in our classroom for some of our students that struggled maybe had some special needs, where they'd have little face, and the faces would show the different emotions. And I'm like, if you articulate how you're feeling, go point to one. And I feel like I need one of those.
That wheel is pretty amazing. And I will link it in the show notes, because it really is very helpful. And they do also have it available as pillows and refrigerator magnets and all sorts of things. The next one is spiritual.
Oh man. As I was manifesting my massive change again, there wasn't any room for anything in my life when I was in that corporate position but work. And even going back and tapping back into those parts of myself, I grew up Catholic and I had left the church. I had such a wonky conversation with myself about what I even believed and what I even felt. And I think for years, again, just like the emotions, I kind of said, we'll deal with that later. And we kind of put that over to the side. So part of what's helped me again manifest this change is sitting with some of those questions and going back to the practices that I, identified with as a kid. I've had a tarot deck since I was 14. I know that sounds a little funny, but I was that weird kid who's let's ask the cards. But I found that pulling tarot cards on a regular basis, I actually did a reading for myself last night. It's another beautiful kind of place to stop and intentionally reflect and check in with how your body is responding to the different cards you're pulling. Any sort of practice that puts us back in touch with ourselves and to source, whatever you want to call it, I think is just, is needed. So building meditation and tarot back into my life, in addition to the work I'm doing around human design, those were small things I could do each day that got me in touch with something a little bit bigger than myself.
And I think that's the three things that you've said: pausing, reflecting, and then really it's expanding, right? Recognizing that it's bigger than you. Those are tools that we all need more of every day. And it doesn't really matter how you do it.
Yeah. Hey.
So for you, that may be tarot cards. For me, it may be the way that I really savor my cup of coffee, right?
I have a friend who has a journal she goes through every morning. They give a little prompt for each day. And I always laugh because I'm that's kind of the same thing my tarot is asking me. But she came from a background where that's she's not quite ready for tarot cards yet. And I'm that's cool. That totally works. But it's such a beautiful way of sitting with yourself and asking yourself questions and thinking about how you fit into, this big blue dot we're all a part of.
The next one is analytical.
Reading has always been such a massive part of my life. And again, that was another thing that went on pause when I was just in survival mode in my career. And so I always have a fiction and a nonfiction book going on at once. And I try to pick nonfiction books that teach me something, that push me in some way, that open my eyes to something that maybe I wouldn't have considered before. Because it is a beautiful analytical exercise to go, do I agree with this person? Where might this be coming from? Is there bias here? What are their sources? So making sure that I always have space in my day to be, thinking about something that's nonfiction oriented, or listening to podcasts that even push my view or, provide analysis on things that are going on, and not just passively listening, but then stopping and kind of having a conversation with myself or my dogs. They don't realize they help me process things sometimes. But I just talk to them and they're, okay. And then I figure things out. But when those pieces are missing, sometimes again, we're in that doing mode. It's the simple little things we can introduce back in.
That processing component is so crucial. And I also listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm a podcast junkie. It's it may be a problem. But one of the things that I've done lately, and I would say in the last 6 months, is whenever I listen to a podcast, I stop and I think, what are my key takeaways from this? And I include those in my podcast to sort of force people who are listening to have those takeaways. But it's been very helpful because it's very easy to just consume. So
absolutely.
Creativity.
I mean, the writing has been, that was the part that was missing. It was funny. One of my kind of mini stops along my career was I used to work for a children's book publisher, and I wrote their literacy blog. I wrote a lot of posts for them. And that was the happiest I was at that job, even though my job was technically, like, I was supposed to be selling children's books to schools. But like, my happiest part of my week was when I got to write a blog post on like how they could use a specific book to teach in their classroom. And so for me, like, the act of writing, holding space for that, whether I'm journaling, whether I'm, blogging a blog post that you see, or creating content for the classes that I teach, like, I feel like I'm only my best self when I'm actually allowing that creative part of me to flourish. And there's so much you don't ever see. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a writing teacher in high school was, he said, he just kept, like, I used to struggle with like turning things in because I felt like it was never finished. It was never perfect. It was whatever, because we fetishize perfection. And his thing was, he gave me an essay, and I cannot remember for the life of me who it was by, but it was by this author who's won like accolades and prizes, etc. And one of the things she said was she would go back and make changes, even in some of those essays or stories or novels, whatever, that won those accolades and acclaim, and that nothing is ever finished, that everything is copy. And that was such a permission slip for me to kind of go, I just need to create every day. I need to create something small, whether it's writing 100 words, whether it's like having a creative project, hanging a picture. I don't know. I need to do something each day that feels like an act of creation. And I don't need to share it with everybody, but I'm glad that what I have shared has resonated with people. I think that's lovely. But that was a massive part of like my heart that was missing for a long time.
I'm so glad you found it again.
I am too. I missed it.
Do you go back and change your blog entries often?
I want to. There's a few things I would definitely change. Like my article on projectors, I don't love the way I explained it, but like I always have to say, like, it exists and it's helping people, and it doesn't have to be perfect for right now. I can rewrite that post or write an addendum or something later on, when it moves me, when I feel good about it. But I try not to go back and self-edit either, because it's what I learned at the time and how I was sharing it. And now I can always go back and augment and, revise. I'm trying to resist that, like, it has to be perfect kind of feeling. And my first line, I'm a 1-3, and like the 1-3 profiles we're nerds who like need to get really deep into a topic. And then we have this trial and error kind of part of our personality. But the nerd part of me wants it to be this thorough, exhaustive, encyclopedic. And I have to go, no, because then I'll never publish it. It's impossible to know everything. So at some point I have to just be like, this is what I have right now.
Down with perfectionism. Just make the thing. The next one is intuitive.
So this is actually a gift that Human Design has given to me, the tapping into our authority. I think when we're children, we're not taught a lot of times even what intuition is. It's kind of this vague, nebulous thing, but in Human Design, the system teaches us every single one of us has a different intuitive voice. You and I actually have the same one. We have our spleen, our sacral, and our root all talking to each other. And so they're kind of, scanning our environment, scanning our opportunities, and it speaks to us in a very clear way at a body level. But someone who's got their solar plexus defined is going to need to feel into things, or someone who just has their spleen defined is going to just have to get this quick gut kind of adrenal yes or no. So intuition being the fact that it's different for every single person was like mind-blowing at first. And then the permission to stop and listen to it, and to know that not everything I'm feeling is mine. It could be me sponging, mirroring, magnifying, just having that like coherent, this is what to feel into. This is what to, this is the thing you can trust, was just so, I realized again through doing this work in Human Design, I had outsourced, just totally unintentionally outsourced so many of my major decisions over the course of my life. Like someone told me, this is your next step, and they seemed really certain. So I mirrored that back and I took that next step, and I never knew to check in with my own physical energy or my timing or my safety. Like those weren't things that I just was doing. And I think that's why I ended up so unhappy and burnt out. So even just pausing and checking in with myself, meditation has actually really helped with that as well. Like having a daily meditation practice. Because, when you sit with yourself and all you're feeling is what's going on inside of you, it's much easier than to tap back in later on.
We get distracted by our heads.
Oh man, yes. I mean, Human Design's one of the biggest things it's taught me is get out of your brain, get into your body. The brain is great for, once the body's made the decision, how do I execute on it? How do I make it happen? Like, what are all the little logistical details? But we can talk ourselves in or out of anything. I'm sure you've had that 2 a.m. moment where you wake up and you're like, the oven is on, and you're completely convinced the oven is on. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, no, it's definitely off. And like, we can do that. Anyway, our brain's incredibly plastic. It's the body where the wisdom really lies.
Regardless of sort of whatever computer program tells you your human design is, right? Because people can believe that or not.
Absolutely.
I happen to think it's a very useful tool, and my children in particular, my husband, not so much. He doesn't identify with his design as much, but my kids do. And so we've used it as a tool. It's been really great. With my clients, even if they aren't interested yet in checking into their own human design, for me to know, people are going to feel intuitive hits in a different way. It's not just the way that I feel it, because I think we're often taught, it's the gut response. And yet for some people, it really is like, no, it's an opening. It's an opening in the chest, or it's
a physical leaning towards something, or
Yeah. So it's really helpful to look into that too, to have a better understanding of what that might look like for different people.
Well, I mean, even just like, again, regardless of whether human design is a tool that you use or not, like one of the takeaways that it's given me is that we're all wired so differently, and that empathy and compassion have to be the way that we walk through the world, because not everybody is wired to attack a project in the same way, or pick a blouse in the same way, or whatever it is. It's like, it could be something massive or minor, that we're all wired so differently. And it's such a beautiful tool to use to just remind yourself that like, we have to kind of meet each other where we are, and everyone's trying their best and navigating what their body is trying to tell them to be true, but like also years and layers of conditioning. So let's all be gentle and kind with each other. We're all navigating this.
Absolutely. Speaking of navigating it with other people, social.
I think connecting with other people who do this work, or who have built their own kind of thing. Like maybe it's strange to even say this, but back when my job ate my life, my only social network were the people that I worked with. And the only thing we really had in common was the fact that we worked together. And so having moved around a lot, once I kind of was able to put roots down somewhere and start meeting people my own age, who had, similar interests, similar values, like that became really important. Life has been so disrupted, I think, in the past few years. Like it's harder now, I think, to meet people socially when we're all kind of masked and at a physical distance from each other. But being able to do that kind of right before everything kind of changed and find those social connections, that was really helpful. I think I didn't really have a social network, I think, before. I mean, I had my good friends from my time in New York City, but I felt like I was completely almost like cut off from, I was observing my friendships as opposed to participating in them. And now I feel like I'm an active participant in my relationships again, which is also really helpful. Yeah.
And another thing you said earlier also relates to this, which is that you feel so much fulfillment from knowing the impact that you have on other people. And that is a social connection to change, because it's not just about how much money you're making this month. It's about like, what is the exponential impact of the work that you're doing? How are other people affected by it? And sometimes we discount how much that means to us, that sense of reach. Yeah.
I so appreciate when people say this was helpful, or this resonated, or I felt seen, or this helped me understand this thing. Like that makes my day.
And then the last one is physical.
I think that was another thing that was very much lacking, I think, back in my old career, because my body was a tool that I was using to just be upright on my feet, delivering content for people. And it wasn't something that was mine. I felt like it was something I was using to give something to someone else. And now being back in a space I can control and at my time as my own, like the way I've eaten even is completely changed and shifted. The way I move each day. Now I love dogs. I have 3. I have 2 of my own that I've rescued and 1 that's I'm fostering. Just getting out for walks with them, getting back outside in nature. Like, those were all things that I think I had seen as like a privilege or like a special treat before. And now they're just part of my everyday. So it's like that physical movement now is almost like a gift I'm giving myself. as opposed to like the thing I'm doing for other people. Like my body was definitely not something I felt very connected to at all during those years.
I also was thinking about how you said that when you hit your rock bottom, you had some autoimmune things come up.
Oh, God.
You were in bed. You had to rest. I also had that. Maybe it's a generator thing, the going hard, and then crashing. And I think about how taking that rest, that real physical rest, gave me the space to then figure out the next steps. And it's something that our culture doesn't make room for.
100%. I was loving even just the name of this podcast, Pause to Go. Like I had to pause. And the generator part of me was so conditioned to like, you're not doing anything right now. You're just being. But I was like, I kept having to remind myself, you've been doing for 15 years. You've been running around working overtime and on other people's calendars, on other people's schedules. You've given and contributed. Now your body is telling you to stop. That happens with generators a lot. It's absolutely true. Generators and manifesting generators, if we're not honoring what our sacral is telling us is a get to versus a have to, after that frustration kind of peaks, if we don't listen to it, we end up with like, it's like our body pulls the emergency brake. And autoimmune things were how it kind of flared up and manifested for me. And so having that 3 to 6 months of just not doing anything, even though my conditioning was telling me you're being unproductive, you're a blob, you need to do something, figure it out. It was actually the best gift I could have given myself, was just that time to, and I was very privileged in that like I had a savings account to support me. I luckily was able to do that for myself. I know that's not something everyone can do, but even just like not beating myself for not being productive, like allowing myself to really rest and recharge and get back in touch with like my physical health. Like the way I eat even has shifted and changed. I was eating in my car or in an airport or fast food or out of a gas station in some places, like fruit, salads, you know, I quit soda a few months ago. Finally, I've been able to kick that habit. When I was traveling, I would drink those, you know, those giant trucker sized sodas they have, like multiple of those a day just to like keep moving. And it's like, I was giving my body so much abuse. And now I'm like, let me nourish it again. Let's figure out what it wants. And, you know, say, I'm sorry for all those years I was not kind to you, like letting my liver now breathe. It's become a very different, like, I don't feel like I'm punishing or abusing it. I feel like I'm actually nourishing and listening to, you know, my physical body in a way that I just wasn't.
It's great. So you've been through all 7 now. That's all 7. You did it.
That wasn't necessarily a speed run. So I was a little it's the open throat. I
love it.
Chatted through the whole thing.
Okay. Here is a question for you. What is one wish that you have for people who are really trying to turn a hard time in their life, a hard transition into an opportunity for deep transformation? What is one wish that you have for them?
I wish them the same gentleness and compassion that they would extend to someone else, to extend it to themselves. I know that, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I find that I am infinitely patient sometimes with other people. Like even I was laughing about this morning. I'm fostering a 16-year-old Chihuahua right now who is so old and so he has so many little special needs. And every morning it's like, okay, some days he eats breakfast right when he's supposed to. And other days it's more like noon. And other days it's more like 2:00. But like with him, I'm like, you're 16. I'm going to just go with whatever you need to do. And I have no problem doing that with a 16-year-old dog. But with myself, we beat ourselves up. We put all this pressure on ourselves. We need to be as gentle and compassionate as we would to someone else, to ourselves when we're going through these. Like we need to kind of love ourselves and support ourselves through these transitions the way that we would another person, you know, an animal. Like I think sometimes we're the ones we have the least compassion and empathy for.
That's a great place to start. And can you tell us how people can work with you or get in touch with you, find you?
Yeah. So I run the website interiorcreature.com, all one word. From there, there's a ton of resources. I write a blog. There's actually a link on the top of my website that says new to human design with a question mark that I've hyperlinked a lot of really helpful articles there. So you can kind of go in and pick the ones that have to do with your chart. I also teach human design to folks who want to learn the system, who really want to understand not just their own chart, but how to look at someone else's. So I'm teaching 2 classes right now that meet live. There's also options to take them, you know, at your own pace. And I do a coaching program called Karmic Studies where I work with people one-on-one and we go through literally every minute detail of your chart over the course of a calendar year. And we really kind of hold that space for reflection and thought partnership. It's not like I have myself all figured out. I don't, but I think it's really helpful to have someone to kind of have those conversations with and to walk with as you're, doing this kind of work and digging into what you want to change, what you want to lean into, et cetera. So we have the Karmic Studies program. And I also do readings. I love sitting down with someone for an hour or two and just let me tell you all about who you are. And I walk you through all the parts and pieces of your chart, how they walk together and what you're here to do, who you're here to be. And even if it's something where you're like, well, this is all, I don't know if this is even a true thing, et cetera. It's a beautiful exercise and just kind of sitting with all the parts of yourself for a couple hours. And most people leave and say, I feel really seen. How did you know that about me? And it's the chart.
It's so cool. Well, I'm going to link your website and your Instagram, all your things in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me and all of my open-throated messiness.
I love that open-throated messiness. It's the best.
Awesome.
Here are my key takeaways from this chat with Jaclyn Michelle. Number 1, human design is a mystical tool that we can use not only to understand ourselves better, but also to help us have greater compassion for other people. Number 2, people feel intuitive hits in different ways. For some of us, it's a gut response. For others, it's an opening or a tendency to move towards something. Keep that in mind, both for yourself and for your loved ones. We don't all have identical operating systems. Number 3, although our culture doesn't really support it, truly slowing down or even stopping for a moment is an important step in realigning when you are totally out of whack. A little rest can go a long way. Jaclyn Michelle created a discount code for Pause to Go listeners. So if you're interested in learning more about your human design, visit her at interiorcreature.com and use the code Pause to Go. That's one word. All of the links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to the Pause to Go podcast. If you got something out of this episode, let us know. Share it with a friend, join our Facebook group, and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts if you loved it. If not, no worries. We want you to tell it like it is, and we'd love to have your input. If you want to know more about what I'm up to, you can follow me on Instagram at TheLovelyUnbecoming or at my website, TheLovelyUnbecoming.com. Stay curious, y'all.